Good morning, Benjamin. How are you today?
I am having one of those days, one of those weeks. I think 2025 is just a summation of week 37 of the chaos that has been caused since week one. This has just been a year of just not like pick the week, new crisis.
Well, I have been noticing that the squirrels are busy this week gathering food for the winter. I wonder, is that a premonition of what's to come?
Well, or maybe they're aware of the inflation that's showing up, so they're worried about nut inflation. So they're
You may be right. Um, but I was hoping you'd go with maybe they're believing in global warming and there's going to be a weird winter pattern this winter and we're all going to freeze extra long, so they've got to be extra vigilant. I don't know.
I just think squirrels are inflationary creatures. Like they're not opposed to over hedging. Like, I don't think a squirrel's ever come to Spring and said, I stored too many nuts.
Oh no. I have now got Benjamin fixated on squirrels and their nuts, and the rest of this podcast is going to go downhill. But
Well,
before we go there, let's correct and get back on track. Thank you for joining the B Squared podcast. I'm Ben, and he is Benjamin. Like the two Ronnies. Do you remember the two Ronnies? You grew up with English TV.
yes.
Yes, except one of them had hair and one didn't. So no, it was Benny Hill who patted the sidekick on the head. So yeah, we can't really do that. We could do it to each other. It'd be funny. Anyway, um, getting off the topic of squirrels, nuts, inflation. We might stay on global warming, but I think today we said we're going to talk a bit about the ore body, and the ore body being probably the one of the biggest pieces of natural capital that we impact in mining.
It's not one of, it is the biggest piece of natural capital impact in mining. There's
Okay.
no ore body, there's no mine.
Yeah.
So it's the linchpin of everything, and how we utilize, conserve, optimize, decide what's ore and what's waste. How we use the ore body is our number one decision in the mining business. One would argue that production geologists have got more of a say in what is money and what is not for mining than anyone else in the business.
But it is very much a finite problem in the mining business because we get in, we dig it up, we use it, it's gone. So it's not like it's a problem that lingers, or
But
is
all
it?
the, but all the tailing people, remember all the tailings people that are talking about reprocessing lovely
Oh,
tailings?
yeah.
I mean, clearly we're going to reuse the ore body at least 3 times, maybe 4 times. Did you see that lovely article from that Swedish lady about how we have enough rare earths in minute quantities and tailings across America that we don't need the Chinese? If we just
Yeah, but
mine at 0.00000001 gram per ton?
yeah, and it's interesting when these type of articles pop up that people think they're revolutionary. I've seen ideas around rare earths and fly ash and minute quantities of stuff in tailings being economically recoverable for at least 20 something years now. Um, yeah, I just don't think it's that easy, and I don't think they've done the math around it. I think
Well,
there are some tailings deposits that may have been done many years ago, a few generations of technology ago, that you can make money out of, but I'm not sure about the rest.
the one I love the most is the connection between the coal fire power plants and nuclear emissions.
Okay.
I think the coal industry produces more nuclear emissions than the entire
Oh, yes.
industry times X multiples, because we release all of the thorium and all the other stuff into the air from burning coal. So it's really interesting how when you actually measure these things on any reasonable scale, you start to realize just how absurd some other arguments are. But let's move away from there being more gold in the ocean and more nuclear emissions in the coal industry, and let's get back to ore bodies.
Oh, and we're
Uh,
not going to start on invisible gold at all. So if you're hoping to hear us give our views on invisible gold, we're not going to.
you mean you're not going to get into a conversation about whether or not Fort Knox is actually Fort Knox?
No, no, no. Invisible gold in all deposits.
Oh, that was my father's favorite thing. Let's stay
Uh,
away from that.
Why does that not surprise me? Anyway, getting back to the ore body, let's focus on ore bodies because we could digress on this all day, and we probably will come back to that. We got off squirrels onto invisible gold. Next time, Next, we'll get on to silver and become silver bugs. But no, we're not going to do that. No, no. Sorry, I'm being facetious. So the ore body starts with an ore body. A mine needs an ore body. We need something that can be worked and we can win metal from economically. Why is that different from, say, a farmer growing cows or crops?
because you fundamentally have only one option for the ore body, and the farmer can choose to grow cows or pigs. The farmer can choose to grow soybean or wheat. Like you don't, farmers have lots of real options. The way I would look at it, I'd flip it to energy production.
Okay.
I need electricity. I can get my electricity from a solar cell. I can get my electricity from wind power. I can get my electricity from natural gas. I can get my electricity from coal. But what I need is electricity. When you're a miner, you need metal. The only place you can get the metal from is the ore body. So it's a one path in, one path out. And to get the metal, you fundamentally remove the ore body, you deplete it. It's a one-time transaction, one path decision. So
Yep.
it's very much the one thing that has to be optimized and one thing that has to be focused on.
Cool. So are we doing a good job of that or not?
No.
Okay, that was a short answer. Do you mind elaborating?
Well, I don't think we do a good job of it because I don't think we've got good boundaries. I think we treat our ore body much like we treat our ex-wives or we treat our ability to deal with emotional regulation among political classes. We create artificial boundaries on what we define as ore as waste. We create artificial boundaries on what we define as product and waste. And we operate between three different paradigms, none of which are actually looking at optimizing the actual natural capital we're depleting from the ore body unmined to the final metal produced. We basically have three different metrics for three different phases of this stuff. And if you put all three metrics side by side, each one is completely rational for the box it's in. But if you
Yep.
stack them all up and you look at it from one end to the other, we make some incredibly irrational decisions in the name of rationality.
Yeah, okay. Especially when you consider it's a resource we only get to use once in reality. So what are the three boxes? I'm a mill rat, so I'm going to say the plant measures recovery. That's an efficiency of use of ore body. But before it gets to the plant, what are the miners using? Strip ratio or
Strip,
waste versus?
strip ratio, ore to waste,
Yep.
pit plan, all of that stuff. So you got the miner,
Okay.
you got the mill, and then traditionally the third box is the smelter. But I'm going to argue there's actually a fourth box,
Oh, what
which is which is
the
the unit.
geologist actually making up a model that doesn't really exist, so it's not there?
No, actually the metal in use.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to argue
Sorry,
that
geologists.
the fourth box. I'm going to argue that we basically have four boxes we go through. We go
Okay.
through geology slash pit slash strip ratio slash pit optimization. We
Yep.
got go to the mill optimization, which generates a concentrate. We go to the smelter optimization, which generates metal, and then we go to the metal optimization, which generates the wealth we generate off the metal we produce.
Aha.
And
But
all, yep,
for a typical mining company, there's only really one of those, unless it's a fully integrated mining and smelting company. There's only one of those metrics that appears in their quarterly report, and
yeah,
that's
only one.
plant recovery.
Yep. We ignore pit recovery.
Hmm. Interesting.
We ignore smelter recovery.
And we ignore the value of the use of the product
Yeah.
and if it does
If
good
you
or bad.
So we judge people based on a metric that's 30% of their total footprint. And so I would argue the metric that we use is less than 30% of the total footprint of production of the metal, way less than 30%, and less than 1/100th of the value attached to the metal. So copper in use, I mean, you're working on this with me. Copper in use has a much higher carbon footprint savings than it does carbon footprint in production. So if you take the value all the way from one end to the other and put them on a continuum, that ore body has a value that far is in excess of the LME value because society gains so much from the ability to use it. I mean,
Which is
what is my cell phone worth? What is a camera worth? What is a piece of equipment worth? I mean, this thing weighs 8, 9 ounces. This camera costs, I don't know, $900, whatever it costs, $400, I don't know. Costs amount of money. It weighs 9 ounces. it's worth far more than the metals that went into it. So we're
Yeah.
not really utilizing, we're not looking at the ore body as natural capital to be used by society. We're looking at the ore body as how do we optimize the metallurgical recovery? And by just focusing on metallurgical recovery, we are losing most of the full value.
And and I think that's a good point. And if people look at the bigger halo of value the metal and what we do in mining creates for many of the metals, I think maybe we would approach it differently. But coming back to metallurgical recovery, it's still something that we could definitely improve. We might claim in some places we optimize around it, but I think a lot of operations, there's space to be gained there because of the current operational paradigm we seem to live in, which is when we want more metal, we jam more tons in.
Well, we write offtake agreements from 20 years ago and never change them.
Mm.
We leave definition of ore and waste to geologists who have zero economic education. We let metallurgists determine what they think of a flotation circuit should be, or what is the decision of how much tonnage to put inside of the flotation tank. I mean, how many operations have we audited, Ben, where throughput was decided by a spreadsheet from 2007?
Yeah, it looks good. And
Looks
it's
good.
done on the simplest metric.
And everyone keeps on that metric, even if it costs them recovery, even if it costs them everything else for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
We're a 100,000 ton a day operation. We are proud that we know we can move 100,000 tons a day through the mill. This is the metric that we get judged by, and we go home and sleep at night and say we've done a good job.
Yeah.
Well, I would much rather move 93,000 tons if the margins are 40% higher. Thank you very much. It's a bit more complicated of a metric. You look like you're a bit of a loser because you aren't getting quite as many tonnage through that throughput, but your margins can go through the roof with very subtle changes to an operation.
So
But
you're arguing not only efficiency and trying to maximize that efficiency, being recovery from the mill and recovery from other portions, but also right sizing the operation. Don't get stuck with the sunk cost fallacy that we have a mining fleet this size, so we must mine ore at this rate. Rather stepping back and saying, hey, does this make sense? Does this make sense? How do we maximize use of this ore body and its economic return to us?
I think one of the things that we are very bad at, and I'm going to come back to the sunk cost fallacy, is we make the decision because we have the truck, we must use the truck.
Mm.
Because we have a piece of equipment, we must use that piece of equipment. Because we have a piece of real estate, we must use that piece of real estate. Whenever something changes, we need to say, hey, those are all sunk costs. We can never get that money back. We cannot change the history. But if we're looking at an ore body and looking at flow charts, we can ask the question, what of these sacred cows can we kill? Because the reality is, pissing off a trading company like Sumitomo or IXM or Trafigura to make another billion or $2 billion, they'll get over themselves.
Yeah.
A lot of these grandfathered agreements buy out. It's worth far more to shift the concentrate spec down 3% to increase recovery by 6% than to sit with a stupid ratio where you're trying to protect a grandfathered agreement that never made sense in the first place because two people got drunk in Zug, had a bottle of vodka between them, came up with a number, neither one of which is still at either of the companies that made the underlying deal, neither one of
Yep.
which you can find the person.
Yep.
And that drinking rage that they went on in 1987 or 2003 or whenever they made these decisions is a really bad premise for optimizing a metallurgical plant. So let's start actually just looking at sacred cows.
But that's a fascinating one from personal experience. I've told you this story before, but not everyone may have heard it. Many years ago, I was given the task of improving recovery of a zinc circuit. Let's talk about what it was. It was a zinc circuit. And I did all this testing and did work with other members of the team and came up with an option to improve recovery, I think about 3%. But it involved having two concentrates, a really clean zinc concentrate and a slightly dirtier one. And I suggested this to the plant manager. He thought it was good. He put the idea up. And the next morning, I got a phone call from the marketing people who I'd never met to that day. There are these mysterious people that sat somewhere away from the mine. and they rang up and said, "Thou shall not play with concentrate specs. It is
Okay.
not allowed. It is verboten."
And if it's not allowed, that's fine. But at least admit that you're giving up hundreds of millions of dollars so someone sitting in some office far in a land far, far away doesn't have a stressful life.
Yeah.
Like, just think about what are you willing to pay for mental health for that person who wears a nice suit? Because make their lives miserable. I mean, what are they going to do? We're in massive.
Or or start the dialogue and start asking questions and see if you can come up with a compromise where every party works. I think part of the problem is we all do these things in silos.
I think we get ready for war. Forget
Mm,
about silos. I think we want to change something and we're like, oh, let's go to war on this or let's go to war on that.
mm,
The reality is change takes time. Okay. We have issues, we have this, we have that, we have all sorts of things going on. We are going to be in a period of change. There's two ways to do change. One is you pre-push change. Two is you post-push change. You push it from the back end. The reality is right now, if you're in the situation where you're trying to run an operation, figure out what is the change you want to push now and
mm,
pre-push it. But don't view it as us versus them. Sit and just give it time. Let the conversation percolate.
mm,
The whether we like it or not, the price or the cost of having access to smelting is going down. Okay. We are going to be in a massive metal deficit the next 15 to 20 years in base metals. We're going to fundamentally have more smelters than we know what to do with because every country, including Pakistan, is hell bent on building their own smelters so they can have national pride.
yep.
Okay. We've got UAE smelters, we got Pakistani smelters, we got Indonesian smelters, we got Chinese smelters. We've got more smelters than we know what to do with. Okay. We are not going to be in a situation where things are going to necessarily be the same as they were in the past. So, what we need to do is we need to start having soft conversations. What is the fundamental driver of an ore body? In my mind, it's to create the maximum amount of economic wealth from the natural capital you destroy. How do we maximize the wealth we create? And I don't care, not to be rude, but I don't care if we have to sacrifice a few sacred, beautiful eggs like concentrate specs. Or, oh my Lord, you mean to tell me that we have to do a partial shipment? We can't ship perfectly neat 10,000 ton lots, but there's going to be a surplus 1,350 tons every quarter sitting on the dock. So we have to do our freight slightly differently for another 750 a ton. Or I don't care, Ben, that your flotation circuit is going to need to have 32 minutes of residence time. And you've got to build 3 more cells because your 24 minutes was not optimal for recovery of the metal.
Yep.
All of these are not hard little things to change, but you have to be willing to have a discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, what does residence time cost? If I had to buy residence time, what's
Relatively,
8 minutes
as
going to
long as
cost?
you real estate, it's relatively cheap.
So what are we talking? 8 minutes of residence time on an operation that already has 24 minutes. You got to build what, another 3 tank cells?
Yeah, depending on the size of the operation, once again, it depends. There's a lot of variables go into that, but we're not talking a given it was already 24 minutes, we're only talking a fractional increase, so not a massive amount.
Okay. So we're talking about like 5 million bucks of capital. And by the time the EPCM is done with it, $175 million of engineering.
Snap.
Well,
That would be
it's a $180 million project. We don't care.
yeah,
The reality is if you can shift recovery by 3% for 180 million bucks, there isn't a mine in the world where that new little mine isn't a wildly profitable operation.
yeah,
Because you're basically, if you have a 100,000 ton a year copper producer and you're suddenly producing another $30 million of copper a year, which is what a 3% shift is, plus or minus a few dollars, you can afford to spend 150 million bucks for $30 million a year of free cash flow. That's a 20% IRR. Not to do it in my head or anything, but this is super cheap, high return money. And by the way, no one's paying the EPCM $175 million. They'll get it done for at least 90. I purposely made the number twice. I made the number actually 4 times larger than it needed to be to actually pay for the tank cells because everyone needs their margin. But even then, it still works.
there's enough pie for everybody.
What I love to do is I'm lazy. So I like to say, hey, what is the NPV to the mining company based on its current enterprise value? So you take the debt plus equity, you look at what the company is being valued at. So like for copper, it's $30,000 per ton of production. So I say, hey, Antofagasta is worth $30,000 per ton of production. Tech's worth $30,000 per ton of production. BHP is worth a bit more than that per ton of production. That's the rough number. I then say, okay, if I'm going to add 3,000 tons of production and I'm getting valued at $30,000 per ton, I take my 3,000 times my 30,000, I can come up with a number. And that's a very, very large number for something where the capital might be 6 million bucks. Like 3,000 times 30,000 is a really, really large number.
There's a lot of zeros on that number.
Yeah, there's enough to pay for at least 2 minutes of EPCM work. And then once you use that as an anchoring, once you use what the enterprise value is, you can then work backwards on that. Now, I think people don't do this because that actually involves getting finance people involved. And you know the one thing that metallurgists hate more than finance people?
Is there anyone?
Divorce lawyers.
Oh no, he's working on his comedy routine as we go. But seriously, when you do take the numbers apart and look at them sensibly, it makes more sense to chase these things, to chase recovery. Why don't we do that more? Is it the silos? Is it because we don't have the finance people and the metallurgists talking about the ore body?
I don't think we can afford the therapists. I think to get a metallurgist and a finance person to have a conversation together, you need to have a facilitator. And I don't think HR has a therapy bill to pay for it.
There you go. But there's opportunity. And that's the exciting thing. So there's definitely a financial incentive to go after things like this, to focus on things, to see if we can use that ore body a bit better.
Or even different.
Mm.
Here's the thing about real options. Because the ore body is a fundamentally depleting real option, i.e., once you don't change it today, you can't change yesterday.
Yep.
Even figuring out that you can't get better has value because you stop worrying about things you can't change. The amount of times in my life when I've had something to optimize, I've been hyper focused on, oh, maybe I could do this, or maybe I could do that, or maybe I could optimize this, or maybe I could optimize that. And I come back 6 months later and realize, oh, well, no, I can't optimize any of that. I'm okay. But if I could just map out what I can't do and say, I can't fix this and I can't fix that. If I can map out all the things I can't do, I'm going to have a lot less stress in my life. I'm going to be far richer.
You can focus on what you can do and get it done, as opposed to worrying about all this can't do stuff.
Yep.
And culturally, I don't think we do that.
We don't do that at all.
Nope.
So what do you want to be asked about in the future, Ben? If people could ask you a question about anything, what do you want to be asked about?
That's a really good question. I don't know what people want to ask us. Are we going to talk about ore bodies? We could talk about other forms of natural capital. I know we did a podcast on water previously, but there's a lot of other topics out there. We could talk about communities around the mine, especially the issues with funding community improvements and doing the right things right by communities and showing that it does have a positive financial benefit. I know that's a challenge for many people in the mining industry. But we could ask anything. And if you're out there and you're listening to this and you have a question for us around mining, finance, sustainability, ideally all three tied together, please reach out.
You could even ask Ben questions about either American football or cricket because he has opinions on both.
Absolutely have opinions on both. Yeah.
As opposed to me, who has no opinions on any of them, but will bet on them if necessary. What we're going to talk about next week is electrification. We're going to talk about carbon and electricity and why the two things aren't the same. And we're going to talk about the value and use of optimizing how we access the power grid and how we access that form of natural capital. The goal over these first sessions is to go over the 5 or 6, and we're going to debate on whether there's 6 or 5 forms of core natural capital for mining company. But our goal is to figure out how we maximize the value of what we deplete. Ore is easy. It's very easy to shift that. There's so much margin to be had. But on some of the Other forms, it's a bit trickier, and electricity, carbon, grid, and all of those things, because there's a lot more emotions attached to access to power,
Oh, yeah.
in some ways gets a lot trickier than ore bodies.
There's a lot of, emotions attached to carbon emissions.
Yep.
The world seems to have gone carbon emission mad, and we're gonna talk about that, and we're gonna talk about if it really matters or not to mining. We already touched on that a little bit today. Also, for subsequent episodes, if you know people who you'd like to see us get on the show and talk to and question, and grill, we promise to be nice. Please let us know. Cool. I think we're just about done for this episode, Benjamin. How about you?
So we will talk to you all later.
Bye.
Bye.